The content you're about to enjoy comes from the archives of The Best You. We're devoted to the very best in personal development, with a platform and resources dedicated to inspiring and changing people's lives. At The Best You, we work with the world's leading writers and trainers on the evolution of the self, and people whose journeys have been affected by their work and words. For more information, go to www.thebestyou.co. Alastair Campbell is a writer, communicator and strategist, best known for his role as former British Prime Minister Tony Blair's spokesman, press secretary and director of communications and strategy. Still active in politics and campaigns in Britain and overseas, he now splits his time between writing, speaking, charities and consultancy. He has written 14 books in the past 10 years, including 8 volumes of diaries, 4 novels, a personal memoir on depression and the pursuit of happiness, and Winners and How They Succeed, a #1 best-selling analysis of what it takes to win in politics, business and sport. In July 2007, he published his first book on his time with Tony Blair, The Blair Years, extract from his diaries from 1994 to 2003. Which was an instant Sunday Times #1 bestseller. In October 2008, Alastair broadcast an award-winning 1-hour documentary on BBC Two about his own breakdown in 1986. Both the film, Cracking Up, and All in the Mind won considerable praise from mental health, charities and campaign groups for helping break down the taboo surrounding mental health. Why I wanted to interview Alastair, well, obviously, he's just an amazing individual. I mean, if you think about it, and this was a great gamble from Tony Blair when he actually decided to recruit him and employ him, because he was a very famous and well-known reporter, but he did have problems with alcohol and depression. And he actually had a breakdown just a year before. So it was a great gamble on Tony Blair. But if you think about it, I mean, he was the one that literally built the whole campaign for Tony Blair, and he was obviously extremely successful. So he's a strategist, and there's a lot to learn around strategy. He's a great guy, but he's helped and supported many charities and created a lot of awareness around mental health. So I'm sure you're going to love this interview. Thank you. Hi, welcome. I'm Bernardo, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing Alastair Campbell. Now, Alastair Campbell is a writer, a communicator, a strategist, and he's better known for his role for former British Prime Minister Tony Blair as the Director of Communications. Alastair, thank you so much for being here with us today. Please tell me a little bit about yourself. Where were you born in your early years?
May 25, 1957, so I'm 58. I was born in Keighley in Yorkshire. Parents both Scots, my dad from the Hebrides, mother from Ayrshire. He was a vet, grew up there, left there when I was 11. My dad had a really bad accident, had to give up his practice. He was a vet, moved to Leicester. He got a kind of quieter life job. Stayed there till I was 18, went to Cambridge and graduated and bummed around for a bit and then became a journalist. So carried on bumming around.
And what was school like for you?
Always liked school. I was at primary school in a little place just outside Keighley. Liked it, liked my teachers. I had 1 term at Bradford Grammar School, and then, as I said earlier, we had to move, and then I went to a comprehensive in Leicester, and always liked it. I mean, I think I've always been a workaholic, always loved words, and never had. Neither of my parents are living, but they always said they never ever had to get me to work, do homework, all that stuff. I wasn't a swot, but I liked working.
So I suppose one of the subjects you looked was language. Was it English?
I did when I got to A-levels. I mean, in terms of going through school, I was very good at English, very good at languages, very good at maths. But I very deliberately went the languages route. In fact, my dad being a vet, I think he was kind of hoping at least one of us would go down the science route, but 4 of us, none of us did. But I always loved words, always loved languages. And so I did A-levels, French, German, English. I think I'm right in saying that I was the first kid from my school to go to Oxbridge. Went to Cambridge. Didn't like it much, to be honest. Felt it very... I think that's when my politics started developing, really, as a kind of... I felt it was very elitist, very privileged. Didn't like it. But I wasted it in a way. I mean, I wish I'd done more when I was at university other than kind of rage against the system the whole time.
Got more out of it, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, I do read a lot, but I think I had 4 years there where I could have been reading the whole time. And I do read a lot of stuff that is out now, but I find myself more and more reading books from the past that I probably could and should have read when I was at university.
Would have helped you, I suppose?
Well, I did okay. I mean, I did all right at university.
You've done all fine,
yeah. No, I did okay, and I got a decent degree, and I've done all sorts of things with my life. But I think that I wish I'd read more. My whole life, I wish I'd read more. I've written a lot, and I do think I think your writing improves the more you read. But yeah, if there's one regret from university, it's that I had all that time. That I enjoyed going out and getting drunk and travelling around watching my football team and all that. I've enjoyed that all my life, but was it really a good use of time? I'm not sure.
Was there anybody kind of like in your early years from school or your early years in general that inspired you?
Well, I did lots of different things I've always, my dad, I said to you earlier, he came from the Hebrides, and he was, obviously, Gaelic actually was he didn't learn English till he was 6, till he went to school. And he was very into the whole kind of Gaelic, Celtic culture. So I learned the bagpipes when I was young. And I had, a series, he was my first teacher, but then I had other teachers. And there's a couple of bagpipe teachers that I really kind of learnt from. And likewise in school, if I had to pick out one, I had a German teacher, a guy called John Webster, and just liked the way he taught me. I liked the way he taught me. Not that many kids were doing A-level German, but I had a real sense that he got where I was in terms of where I was developing in terms of the language, and I just sensed he was teaching me separately from everyone else, if you see what I mean, even within the confines of a classroom. And I think he sort of thought there's something a bit special here and I can really work on it. And I remember that. I had good teachers. I had some that, probably were a bit average. But I do think that the real role of a teacher is to kind of use the word inspire. It is actually to make people want to love learning. And I think too much of the attitude in school is that it's like something to be endured, and I mean, I never ever, if anybody ever says to me, you'll look back on your school days as the best days of your life, I think that's the worst possible message you can give to anybody, because actually it should be preparation for better things ahead. And I think one of the things I developed at the various parts of my educational process, as it were, was a sense of aspiration and ambition, and you've got to be careful this doesn't become kind of cocky and arrogance, but I was never too impressed by everybody else just because they were technically above me. I would challenge teachers. I would ask them why did they think that, and I would quite often find it's because they've always done it like that. And I would sometimes say, why do you do it like that? Why do you think about doing it like this? And likewise when I became a journalist, and I started on a local paper. And, so I arrive on this local paper in Tavistock in Devon, very small paper. And, your first day you think, oh my God, there's that woman there. She's the editor of a local newspaper. And then, again, this, I guess, will sound a bit cocky, but within a week or so I'm thinking, I reckon I could do that. And I think that is, often when I'm doing I did one yesterday, school journalism colleges and things like that, and you're talking to, and they all say, what piece of advice do you have? Da, da, da. And I always say, don't underestimate the people above you, but don't overestimate them either. And don't think there's anything wrong in aspiring to want to do what they're doing, but try and do it better.
That's great advice. So when you said that in university you started to become a little bit more political. Now I know you went down the journalist route, but was that the reason you went down that route of being a journalist, because you wanted?
It's certainly the reason why I became a political journalist, I think. What I meant by that was that I became more aware of politics. I mean, I didn't grow up in a terribly political household. I grew up in a house that was where, the parents who watched the news, read the papers, would be able to tell you who all the cabinet were, all that sort of thing. But they weren't intensely political, left or right. I think that what I mean by how I became more political, I became more politically aware, first of all, I'd say. And I became more conscious, I think, of where I stood politically on what I would call, the big things. And I think if there's one thing that my background, I think, definitely left in me in terms of politics, it's that Britain is actually quite a class-based country. That we do tend to have this kind of, belief that if you've got this sort of self-perpetuating ruling elite at the top, things will work out for everybody else, and history suggests that's wrong. And that actually, if there's one thing that I think makes me left of centre rather than right of centre, it's a real belief in equality of opportunity and a real understanding that it doesn't exist. And so politics for me has always been about how do you try to bring that about. You're probably never going to deliver it in a way that is going to satisfy everybody, but actually to have that as your goal. And a lot of the stuff I do now, and I've just spent 3 days at a university in University of Staffordshire in a residency, talking to all the different students in different faculties and different departments and different disciplines. And I think if there's one thing, if I look at the sort of people that I, was educated with at Cambridge University, say, and then I look at the kids that I was with yesterday, in terms of background, there is a huge difference. And I think that probably linked to that, there is a difference in terms of confidence and aspiration. And how do you give people who maybe lack that? How do you give them that? Can you educate in that? And I think you can. And I think some of our learning, because you've got kids going through school and it's all about exams and get them through this test and then the next one and then the next one. And then they get to further and higher education, and they're thinking, right, okay, well, now I'm kind of in the big league. What do I do? And actually, what I was saying to the people that are running this university, I said, do you actually take time out when they arrive to say, now, do we actually need to go down to some very, very basic things here about confidence and about resilience and about how you project yourself and about some of the skills that a lot of the kids that I would have seen at Cambridge they have because of their background and because of the kind of posh expensive schools that they went to.
So for example, with your early years when you became a journalist, tell me how your life evolved and how you moved forward till you became really involved in politics.
Well, I left university without a clue as to what I was going to do. Not a clue. I hadn't applied for any jobs. I didn't know in my mind what I wanted to do. So I left university and I just kind of, I literally did bum around for a bit. I was a busker. I played the bagpipes pretty well. I made quite a lot of money being a busker. I was a roulette dealer in a casino in Shaftesbury Avenue. I worked in a few factories. I was travelling about. I just didn't know. I was drinking very, very heavily. I was kind of still living the student life post-university. And to this day, I don't know how I knew that the Daily Mirror ran a training scheme, and I can't remember applying for it. But apply for it I did. And it was one of those kind of, you sometimes look back. I'm 58 now, as I said, and you sometimes look back and think of, chapters, key moments and what have you. There's no doubt, however it was that I found out about it and knew about it, because there's no real journalism in my family. I think I've got a couple of, twice removed, one who worked for BBC Scotland, but it's not a media family at all. So I applied. I discovered that one of the guys who interviewed me at the Mirror, I think there were 1,100 applicants for 12 places or something. So I thought, this is going to be a struggle. Anyway, I got through. First day there, I met Fiona, who still is. We've been together now for 36, 37 years. We were both on this training scheme, and then we both asked, we got together very, very quickly, and we both asked if we could go to the same paper, the Tavistock Times. Then we moved to the Sunday Independent, which is a regional Sunday paper, and we were based in what we used to call the Truro Bureau, which is this tiny office in Truro, just the two of us and one other guy. And the best thing about the training scheme there, and I think one of the problems with journalism is that training is kind of, I think, takes a back seat now in terms of making people professional journalists who know about law and shorthand, and I think now it's just, sort of who get them in, wheel them in. Local papers now pay such terrible wages. It's but the training scheme then, one of the best things about it was that you were given 6 weeks guaranteed shifts on one of the National Mirror titles, and I was given 6 weeks on the Daily Mirror. So you're thrown in there, and they're watching to see whether you're up to it and what have you. And so I got 6 weeks, which became 8, which became 12. I then started to freelance around other papers. I worked at several of the other Fleet Street titles doing shifts. And then in the knowledge that the Mirror had said to me, look, the next time that a general news reporting vacancy comes up, you can have it.
If you're interested in working with me, contributing to the magazine, maybe speaking at any of our many events around the world, partnering or licensing The Best You, go to www.thebestyou.co.
So I then get a job at the Mirror. And then fast forward a few years, definitely another kind of big chapter. 1986, I got headhunted. I left the Mirror to go to Today as a news editor. So I was 28 and I was a news editor. Way out my depth. Should never have done it. Drinking like a fish now, going completely out of control. And spring of 1986, I had a complete, total psychotic meltdown. Pretty difficult period. Ended up in hospital. Well, got arrested. Ended up in hospital. And then, extraordinary thing happened. My former boss at the Mirror, who had been really, really angry when I left. I mean, like really, sort of never darkened my door again, angry. He was one of the first people to get in touch, and he sort of basically said, look, I did warn you. I did tell you not to go. I did tell you this would be a disaster for you. You didn't listen. Right, well, listen to me now, he said. Carry on taking the money while you're sick. When you're well, come back here. And that was brilliant. That was like, And I started at the bottom again. Night shifts, so-called dog watch. Slowly rebuilt myself, got my head together, stopped drinking. And then a couple of years after that was political editor.
Just a quick insight. You stopped drinking with any help, or?
What happened on that was that I did have help. But the specific help was a guy called... The thing is about when you've got a drink problem, I saw this with myself and I've seen it with other people that I know, both before and since. Until you, the drinker, you, the addict, sees that you have a problem, there's no point anybody else telling you, because it just drives you more and more towards it. But what happened with this guy, I got arrested and I was allowed out on condition I went to hospital. So I went to hospital. It was a weekend, and the psychiatrist didn't come in until the Monday, and he was this little guy called Ernest Benny. When I wrote a novel about a psychiatrist, I dedicated it to him. This was a few years ago. But back in 86, this guy, he sat there and he was just very, very calm, very gentle. I was away with it at the time. I was sedated, but I'd been through a full-on psychotic breakdown, voices, music, paranoia, just pretty horrific. And when I was arrested, I'd left all my possessions on the floor. I was in this council building in Hamilton. Left all my possessions on the floor, so the police had taken them away, and then they gave them to the hospital. And so it's weird how this stuff kind of plays out, because you may know I keep a diary, and I need to publish my diaries. And so he said, I noticed in your possessions that there's what looks like a personal diary there. And he said, do you think you could talk me through, if I just spotted a couple of days here, do you think you'd remember where you were and what you were doing, and you could maybe just talk me through a day? And so we did a couple of days, and then we went on to another day, and he said, do you think, as you're taking me through this day, you could try to remember how much you were drinking? And so I talked him through this day, and as I was recounting how much I'd been drinking and how much I was thinking about drink and how much I was planning on to drink, and it just dawned, this sort of slowly, this penny dropped. So he wasn't saying anything. And I'm just saying, so then I went here, and then I did this, and then I had a bottle there, and then I think I probably popped into the pub, and then I probably had maybe a couple of scotches then. And this particular day ended with me in a pub called the Lord High Admiral. I don't even know if it exists anymore, on the Vauxhall Bridge Road, and phoning Fiona from the phone box in the corner of the pub, having a row because I was pissed and I was, late and like that. Me slamming the phone down saying I'm not coming home, and I booked into a hotel, that big hotel up near Victoria Station, I can't remember what it's called, and I booked in there and I demolished the minibar. So as I'm getting towards that, the penny is dropping, and I'm thinking, God, I haven't even got to the minibar yet. God, I haven't even got to the evening yet. And that was it. That was. So, did I have help? Was it difficult thereafter? Ish. At times it was. But I went 13 years without a drop. I do have a drink occasionally now. I probably shouldn't, but I do. But certainly 1986 is the last time I was drunk. And I got into this thing. It's funny about how when I was growing up in Yorkshire, one of my heroes was Jeff Boycott, the cricketer. And I loved him for being cussed and difficult. But I loved this kind of batting style of just kind of grinding it out. And if a bad ball came along, whack. And if it was a good ball, just, I don't care, play it down. And I used to do this thing where every night when I went to bed, I would say, and there we are, Jeff Boycott takes another single off the final ball of the over. He's now up to 3,412. And I think I'd got well past 8, 9, 10 years before I actually stopped counting.
Wow.
I was literally counting every day. And there was a time in my life when I could quickly tell you how many days, how many hours, how many minutes since I had a drink. I can't do it now. It's gone, but...
Thank you for sharing that. I'm kind of what the common denominator with many people is that there seems to be sometimes a turning point in someone's life. Would you say that was a turning point for you?
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. That was of all the steps, and then it was also what it led to. I was very lucky that Fiona stayed with me. A year later, we had our first child, and I'm sure that's related as well. That I was.
She obviously saw potential in you, Alastair.
She stuck by me when a lot wouldn't. That is for sure. That is for sure. She did an interview once where she said when one of my books came out. She did an interview about what's it like living with Alastair Campbell, and she did this. The headline was something like, "On balance, I'm glad we've stayed together."
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, on balance. So yeah, that was definitely a turning point. And then what have the others been? One of the biggest turning points in my life was when John Smith died, leader of the Labour Party. I was a journalist. He died, and Tony Blair became leader. And that was, certainly in terms of my professional life, that was probably the biggest turning point.
How comes you got together? How did that start?
I knew Tony very well as a journalist. When he first got elected, I was covering politics. It was actually Fiona's brother, Gavin, he's now a QC, and he was a young lawyer then. And I remember he was the first person who ever mentioned Tony Blair to me. He said, by the way, there's a new guy just been elected up in the northeast of England, Tony Blair. You want to watch out for him? He's really smart. So I was on the lookout for him a bit. And I can actually remember the first time I met him. in the House of Commons Central Lobby, which is where I used to kind of ply my trade. And when there's been an election and there's a new parliament elected, journalists are just it's like you've got all these new faces, and you're trying to find out who's interesting, who's newsworthy, who's worth cultivating, who's worth getting to know. So you're literally just hanging around, constantly bumping into people and introducing yourself. And of course, the dynamic at that time, he's a young MP, just elected. I'm like, political hack on the Daily Mirror, which for a Labour MP is quite an important thing. Mm. And so, but I sensed something very special in him. I was also, I knew Gordon Brown probably better at the time. But then when Tony became leader, by then I think it's fair to say that my journalism had become more political than journalistic. I was actually, with my boss's knowledge, if you go to America and you tell people this, they just think, how can you do this, right? But I was covering, say, Neil Kinnock, but I was also helping with speeches. I was open about it, but I was a very biased journalist. And so I got to know Tony and Gordon and all the, people coming through the ranks. And then when Tony became leader, he asked me to work for him. I actually said no first, partly because of my breakdown, but I thought,
Because you thought the pressure?
I thought I knew that the pressure would be, Fiona didn't want me to do it, my parents didn't want me to do it. Neil Kinnock was saying, listen, this will ruin you, this will be the ruination of you, you don't want to do this, the worst. I remember saying it's the shittiest job known to man.
Wow.
Press secretary to leader of the opposition, shittiest job known to man. And he said, so he was saying don't do it. But I felt it was right for me at that time. I definitely felt I could give Tony something that other people couldn't. And so everybody was telling me it was the wrong thing to do, but I felt it was the right thing to do. And I went for it.
So you obviously saw something in him, which you said you saw before. What did stand out from the beginning when you met him and when you saw him evolving as a leader?
I think it was what was it? I think it was a shared sense of frustration that the pace of change within the Labour Party just... I felt that he, coming in new, would be able to do more and go faster than John Smith could or wanted to. And I think he had a real zeal and energy to do it. And I think it was also the fact that, my big thing has always been, I'm utterly obsessed about winning. And I like to think that I'm good at strategy. And he said that, look, I want you to be a press guy, but this isn't the spokesman's job. This is about strategy. This is about helping me do the strategy. So that was the first thing. And the second thing was that I really had a sense that he was going to set big, bold objectives. And I just thought... And it's funny how sometimes you get images come into your mind. I'm a great believer in visualization, and in my latest book on winners, I've got this section with Diego Maradona where I'm talking to him about the importance in football of what he calls visualize the victory, and what does that mean? And I think that visualization, I think we all do it, and sometimes it's accidental. Sometimes you can't even control what's happening to you. And I found that when I was making my mind up about whether to work for Tony, with all these pressures not to do it, these images kept coming into my mind. Now, one of them, I was still a journalist. It was the day after the election, and John Major was walking back into Downing Street. And I'm a journalist thinking, God, I wonder if I could have done something about that. And then another image that came into mind was Tony Blair's walking to Downing Street, and I'm still a journalist, and I'm thinking, I could have been part of that. And then the third one, Tony Blair's walking into Downing Street, and I'm just behind him. Now, those were really powerful images that were coming into my head. And I went with the third one.
That's fascinating. I mean, in NLP, we understand that we all make pictures in our minds, and obviously part of the process is visualizing. So kind of like when something drives you, you have a big picture, and what you've just described is great because you obviously made 3 pictures and you went to the one that drove you. You know, you were driven towards, and that's success really. At the end of the day, is being driven towards something that with passion. I'm a big fan of obviously of strategies and strategy, and again, you know, part of what I learn is that you can teach things if you understand the strategies that people apply and how they use. And it's about modelling and learning people's thought process, so you can then get those strategies and install them on others. What does strategy mean to you?
I think the 3 most important letters in the English language are O for objective, S for strategy, T for tactics. So strategy to me is what I call the big how. So you set your objective, this is what you're trying to achieve, whether it's win an election, win the Premier League, do a TV show, whatever it might be. That's your objective. What's your strategy? So the strategy is what I call the big how. So for us in New Labour, for example, the strategy was modernisation. For Steve Jobs, when he went back to Apple second time around, the objective was survival. It wasn't to become this behemoth it's become, it was survival. And the strategy was simplification. The thing had got too complicated. The products got complicated, the culture had got complicated, it just didn't work. So that's what I mean by the big how. And I think strategy too often is the place where people avoid argument rather than have argument, and you get too many mixed messages in strategies because people actually don't want to. They're so scared of disagreeing that they don't agree, and so they try and pretend that even though they disagree, they're pursuing the same strategy. So that's what I say. I think the objective is your goal, the strategy is the big how, and the tactics are the tools and the techniques that you're going to use.
Regarding all these leaders, once you were in New Labour and you guys won, obviously your life changed dramatically. Tell me about those years and what happened and how was the journey?
Well, it was fast. It was relentless. It was complicated. It's funny, when I published my diaries, a lot of people say, "God, you were miserable a lot of the time, aren't you?" And it was like, diaries where you're kind of emotionally dumping a lot of stuff. But it was difficult. There's no point denying it was always difficult. Because we won 3 elections, people look back and think, it's extraordinary how history gets rewritten. People say, "Oh, yeah, but you had the media on side." Well, we didn't actually. We had to work very, very hard to get a reasonably level playing field for some of the time. But even that wasn't straightforward, wasn't easy. I think if there's one word, it would be relentless. It was utterly relentless. I do look back now. Sometimes I flick through my diaries and I think, I still have a very busy life. I do lots of different things. I'm talking to you. I've done a charity thing this morning. I'm talking to you now. I've got a thing on this afternoon. I've got a dinner tonight. I'm going to the Middle East tomorrow. I've just had 3 days at university. But it feels like a tenth as busy as I used to be. Because it was the fact that you were dealing with so many things at the same time. And so, it was relentless, I'd say. But very, I'm glad the thing about happiness is interesting. I sometimes look back and think I wasn't happy a lot of the time, but I'm very, very happy that I did it. I'm very glad that I did it. I've written 11 books now since I left Downing Street, and one of them is a little memoir about depression called The Happy Depressive. And I say in there that I think this is a kind of atheist way of keeping broadly on the straight and narrow. I've never seen life as being about the pursuit of happiness. I honestly don't think. I'd rather be happy than sad. I'd rather feel good than feel bad. But I don't feel that happiness is kind of what I'm looking for the whole time. My mum, for example, she always used to say, "Why can't you just be content?" And I'd say, "Well, because I don't particularly want to be. I have a fear of the comfort zone. I have a fear of just kind of coasting and not doing much. Now maybe one day I'll just sort of crash down in a chair and think, oh, sod it, just chill out. But I don't think I will, because I think life is about. I don't think if you've had a really happy life until you're starting to do a bit of a reckoning towards the end.
To find out more about our latest projects, get a free coaching lesson, or download my book, go to www.bernardo-moya.com. I think part of it is that I think people want to start enjoying the journey from moment one. And the bottom line is the objective, What is it I'm trying to achieve? Who is it I want to be? What's my legacy in life? And that takes time.
Yeah, I certainly don't think of it in terms of legacy. I think I always get a bit, when people say, what do you think your legacy will be? And as far as I have one, it'll be related to other stuff that I've done with other people. So like in relation to, when you introduced me, you best known working for Tony Blair. Well, that's true. Now, who's the big historical figure in that? It's going to be Tony Blair. So there's other stuff that, if I think of all the things that I do now, whether it's in business, consultancy, whether it's charity, whether it's writing, whether it's speaking, the stuff that I really actually get most out of probably is the stuff that I do campaigning on mental health. I would like to think that that to me is a possible. I don't think of it in these terms, but actually, this is a different form of visualization. I want to believe that by the time I'm dead, that most people in Britain will think differently about mental health and mental illness. Now, there's no way that you or I are ever going to know when that has happened, but I've got a sense that it's changing. I've got a sense that there's movement on it. It's not as simple as knowing, okay, right, if you're Arsene Wenger and you're manager of Arsenal and you play a game and you win or you lose, and even that's that game, but then how do you get judged over a season, then over a career? So we're all doing that. Everybody's doing that. And that's why I say I don't think it's ever about one moment in time.
No. So tell me about mental illness and kind of the facts are staggering, about being the biggest killer for males in the UK under 40-something. Suicides, yeah. What's your thoughts regarding it? And why are we, I know, watching one of your tweets the other day, why are we still ignoring it? Why are we still
I don't think we're ignoring it. I think actually there's much, much more awareness. And I think there's more understanding. But I think that it's
a staggering figure.
It is, and if it was any other illness or any other issue, the idea that government wouldn't sort of say we've got to do something about this. If it was cancer, if it was heart disease, if it was lung disease, if it was liver disease, they'd be like, we've got to do this. So you're right. I mean, most people are completely unaware of this. Suicide is now the biggest killer of young men in Britain today, bigger than anything else. And I think that, my worry at the moment actually is that I'm an ambassador for this campaign Time to Change, which is the mental health charity. It's got good funding. It's all about awareness, changing the way that people think. My worry is I think we're having a very successful campaign in terms of improving people's awareness and understanding. But that is leading more and more people to realise that maybe they've got problems that need addressing, and then when they try to address them, they find the services aren't really there. And I think that is a growing problem. But the big picture. You talk about the big picture. The big picture I have is to get to a world where we feel, you and I and everybody else, we feel that we can be as open about our mental health as we are about our physical health. And I don't see why we can't. In a way, I've been lucky because I was forced into being open in a way. Because when I had my breakdown, everybody in Old Fleet Street knew about it. Because, I was quite well known in the newspaper world, and all these rumours are going round. Alastair Campbell's gone mad, he's cracked up, all sorts of stuff went round about what actually happened. But people knew that I'd been in hospital, I'd been arrested, and blah, blah, blah. And so I just decided when I went back, I'll just tell people what happened, and I'll say what it was like. And then so then you're a journalist. Nobody really is that bothered. It's not a story for your colleagues, it's just that you're telling them. When I started working for Tony Blair, my past is suddenly a story. So they started writing about it. And I just decided from the very first day when I got a phone call about it from a journalist saying, I'm doing a piece about you and I'm doing a profile. I want to cover your breakdown in relationship with alcohol and da-da-da-da. And I just took a decision there and then, be open. And I've never, ever regretted it. It's one of the best things I ever did. I've never tried to say, listen, that was then, this is now, it's got nothing to do with who I am now. I've actually said, yeah, that happened, and I'll tell you what, it's been the making of me.
And do you think that's part of the problem, that people aren't willing to share, ask for help?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Particularly men. Particularly men. I think women, I don't want to stereotype, but I think it's fair to say that women are more open, more capable of being open about their emotions with each other. I think men do tend to bottle it up. And then what happens is that the sense of isolation grows and grows and grows and grows and grows, so that depression can become a spiral, and it ends in, for an awful lot of people, in death.
And when you're saying that you feel that there's not the help out there to help people, nowadays with technology, there's coaches, therapists, trainers. I know the NHS may have its limitations, but don't you think there's a lot more out there that people could seek help from?
No, I don't. That's fine if you've got lots of money and lots of connections and you can find all the people you want. But I think if you're, a lot of the people we're talking about, young men who are taking their own lives. There was a report last week about the impact of a lot of the benefit changes that there have been on the suicide rates in certain socio-economic groups. That's just it's kind of obvious when you read it, but what are we doing about it? So no, I'm talking about, to give you one statistic. I think one of the best things we did in the Labour government was IAPT, improved access to talking therapies. And at the moment, 15% of people that doctors think would benefit from talking therapies are getting it. Until recently, we didn't even have maximum waiting times for psychological support. So no, I think it is still, I'm afraid, the Cinderella service. And if you think about if you're a government or you're a commissioner or you're a trust and you're getting all this message the whole time about cuts and austerity and value for money and da-da-da-da, and let's say you're sitting there and you've got a choice. You're a big hospital, you could cut cancer services, you could cut A&E, you could cut kids' paediatric services, or you could cut mental health. Which is the easiest of those four to cut?